Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. We'll just wait a couple of minutes before we get started. I always appreciate the emojis. Lets me know people are on the other side. Thank you, thank you. Wonderful. Oh, you're all so kind. Thank you for the good mornings. Very much appreciated. All right. So while we're waiting, just a quick note that everyone asks in every webinar I've been involved in for the last year, will we get a copy of the recording and presentation materials? Yes, always. Yes, and always. And there will be reminders throughout our time as well, because people will jump in late and have the same question. So let that be like a baseline moving forward. We will always share, as long as you've registered and we have your accurate email, we will always share the recordings and the presentation. Usually takes us a couple days to process to make sure we get all your questions and answers. So since I brought up Q&A, please be sure to use our Q&A function. We will not be answering questions that come through the chat. I will always be reminding you, if you do ask a question of your host, me, and panelists, I will remind you to please drop it into our Q&A so that it can be addressed at the end of our presentation. We will have a 10-minute break midway through. And today's presentation, of course, is on screen, our post-assessment training for a CAS Assessor series. We do have 2 more trainings after this one today. On the 18th, February 18th, is conversational case management and implicit bias training. And then on February 26th, we have an introduction to trauma-informed practices, as well as vicarious trauma, understanding that and how to help prevent that. Yeah, so those are also at the same place you most likely registered for this one, and I'll be sure to drop that in the chat as well. So we'll begin to move forward through the content. Today we had about 385 folks register. It looks like we're at about 200, so we're good to move forward. As long as my slides are working, right? Our presenters today are Shai Turkin, Program Analyst, as well as Talal Zine, Muro, and I hope I'm saying your last name right. I know I asked your first name, but not the last. They will both be presenting today to represent the CAS housing team, which is here. And sometimes we don't know who we're talking to. So this is a really lovely addition. And for those of you who don't know, Elizabeth Rios is the newest addition to the CAS housing team as well. Today's presentation will describe and apply the various doc readiness requirements for CAS participating housing programs. We'll also get into how to implement these skills to update the client's housing progress using case conferencing and other tools. And then finally, we'll learn how to navigate the program's resources, eligibility, and more. With that, I am going to turn this over to the CAS housing team and Shaitra.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shai Turkin. Thank you for being here. Yeah, so we're going to start with some assessments, which are pretty important in terms of thinking about CAS housing, and it's where all of the housing journey starts. Next slide. So the main assessments that we're thinking about when it comes to housing, we want to have the current living situation, which should be done monthly, the crisis assessment, which has to deal more with shelter and or housing prevention funds, the housing conversation tool, which deals with trying to get clients into possibly any permanent supportive housing or permanent housing or rapid rehousing, and the individualized service, individualized support plan, which is very helpful for you and your client to be on the same page about what are the steps needed to move forward with any of those housing options. And so just having that distinct conversation of next steps. Next slide. So the assessments in HMIS, so when you're going to the CAS agency, these are the assessments that are available. When we look at the ones that are in green, we're mainly thinking about any of the changes in the client's circumstances. So the current living situation, which should be done monthly, is where are they living. This also helps to verify in HMIS clients experiencing homelessness, which is pretty helpful. So yeah, these are things that you should keep in mind and familiarize yourself with. And then we also have the blue ones, which are the assessments with the blue background. These are listed as CAS assessments, which will help to create and facilitate the client's journey towards permanent housing. So we have the case conferencing tool.
Sorry, Shaitra.
No worries.
The slides just took on the life of their own.
We do what we want. If
Give
we
me
can go back more.
Give me a moment, please, because now Siri apparently wants to participate as well. Good times when tech is not on our side.
Hmm.
All right, we're going back to the assessments and we'll try again.
Sounds good.
So I was just on the COC board meeting and there was also some Zoom glitches as well. So this will be a fun one today. There we go. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah, so we have the case conferencing tool, which is helpful in terms of cross collaboration with clients, the crisis assessment, as I mentioned prior, which is going to do about like shelter and housing prevention, and then the housing conversation tool, which is mainly what we're going to focus on today in terms of accessing permanent supportive housing and permanent housing. And next slide, please. Yeah, so the housing conversation tool, also known as the VI SPDAT, we went through some changes and then also condensed a lot of those into only one. So instead of the VI SPDAT and an FYI and a LEAP, it is all one, which helps us be able to find eligibility using only one assessment. Yeah, so we use this with households at risk or currently experiencing homelessness, and the ISP is used to develop a client-led housing-focused service plan. This also helps us to determine clients' eligibility for CAS participating housing. As I mentioned before, this is our rapid rehousing, our permanent supportive housing, and our other permanent housing. And then it also helps us to make sure that clients are prioritized based on their vulnerability and housing barriers. Okay, so assessment to priority list. So we usually hear quite often, it's like, how do I get my client on the priority list? Things of that sort. Well, you do that by completing the assessment. And so with this assessment, it takes all the responses and then creates a priority list. And the way that this priority list is created is taking the vulnerability score from highest to lowest, then taking the barrier score from highest to lowest. And then if there are any of them that are the same, then there is a tiebreaker used by the length of time homeless. And this is found in multiple areas in HMIS that we get this information. Next slide. Yeah, so the priority list examples, I like to give you an example of this. So for example, we have client A, who is number 2 on our priority list. Their vulnerability score is 14, their barrier score is 5, and their length of time of homelessness is 3,683 days. So they are number 2. For our client B, who's number 332 on our priority list, their vulnerability score is 7, their barrier score is 6, and their length of time homeless is 8,528 days. And as I want to highlight the difference, so the barrier score with client A is lower than the barrier score of client B. And that's because, like I said, we take the vulnerability score first. So all the people in that one are the highest and lowest, and then it's the barrier score of the highest and lowest of that one. So you care more about where they land in the vulnerability score. And then I want to bring up the tiebreaker. So client C, who is number 331 on the priority list, which is just, sorry, one below. The vulnerability score is 7, and the barrier score is 6, and the length of time homeless is 1,862 days. So if you're ever looking at it, when you're finished the housing conversation tool, they usually give you this video, this screen that tells you the barrier score and the vulnerability score. So that will give you an idea of where your client would land on the priority list. Next slide. Okay, so what is the order of prioritization of the housing priority list? So we're going to have a poll here, and we'll give you about 20 to 30 seconds to answer the question. Okay, our poll is closed. So what is the order of prioritization of the housing priority list? And 80% of y'all got that correct. And it is the vulnerability score goes first, highest to lowest. The barrier score goes second, highest to lowest. And then the tiebreaker is the length of time homeless. Awesome job. Okay, yeah, so we'll have a few of these poll questions throughout the training to kind of highlight some of the more important aspects of the housing that we want to keep in mind. But fantastic, 80%. So now we're going to talk about document readiness, and that is going to go to my esteemed colleague, Glazine Muro.
Thank you, Shaitra. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Glazine Muro. I'm going to walk you through document readiness here with us. So next slide. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so permanent supportive housing, the basics you can see here on the screen. So the basics refer to the minimum documents required for, oh, excuse me. The basics refer to the minimum requirements, minimum documents required for referral to be completed in HMIS. Excuse me, all that was a bit of a mouthful for me. So PSH documentation is the highest level of documentation a client can achieve, and this grants them access to all housing programs. So it's important to also note that additional documentations may be necessary from the housing program, such as pay stubs, bank account statements, and proof of identity to finalize any applications needed. And then the main difference between permanent supportive housing documentation is the verification of chronic homelessness and disability. So here you can see on the screen the basics for, again, PSH or permanent supportive housing. So disability certification that never expires, homeless certification, and then the chronicity verified, which will be that homeless certification of 12 months.
You also need ID documents, so valid ID, birth certificates for the minors, and social security cards for all household members. Next slide. And now you have permanent housing. So again, the basics refer to the minimum documents required for a referral to be completed in HMIS. And the PH documentation allows access to some programs, so including project-based voucher programs and rapid rehousing programs. So again, the main difference between PSH and permanent housing PH is that permanent housing documentation does not require chronicity or disability verification. Next slide, please. Okay, great. So here we can see the disability form, and I do want to highlight the two different sections and how to complete this form. So first of all, the disability certification for permanent supportive housing, PSH, does not expire, but it does need to be completed in full and correctly the first time around. So you can see here we have two sections. Both can be completed, but really you just need one to be completed in full to be acceptable. So you have section 1, which is to be completed only by a homeless service provider, housing service provider, excuse me, or a healthcare worker. This section will be utilized when the client already has a verified disability. This can be proven or verified by either a disability receipt check, so SSI, SSDI, veteran disability, things of that matter. That receipt of verification will need to be attached to this form, and you will complete section 1. Now, if the client does not yet have any verified disability, then you might be looking at completing section 2, which can only be completed by a licensed professional. And it's very important that the appropriate boxes are checked off. So the first one that certifies that the individual does have a disability, and then the second set, which will indicate what type of disability. It's also really important that if you're completing section 2, that the license number is included, otherwise the form will not be accepted. So again, you can complete either section 1 or 2. There's instances in which maybe the client has both, and that's okay, but just one section completed in full is necessary for this form. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we can see the third-party verification. This is used to verify chronic homelessness, again, 12 months or 12 consecutive months, or 4 instances over the last 3 years that add up to 12 months. And so you will utilize this form, or this is one of the forms that you can utilize to verify that. It's important to have the client's name and the HMIS ID, and that the third-party verifier, so who will verify this form, completes their information. So name, title, where, maybe business, agency, or organization. So who are they, the address, and a contact number. You can utilize, or you will utilize the midsection here to indicate which months the client is stating or verifying the homelessness, or the verifier, excuse me, is indicating that. And then there's some specific sections here on the bottom half that if we can get over to the next slide, that would be great. Okay, perfect. So this is the middle section of the third-party verification form that we just saw. And so I just want to highlight this section right here on how to complete it. I want to emphasize the start date and the end date. It's very important that we have that in here. This will allow us to really verify what month exactly we are looking at. Specifically also adding the location, perhaps a geographic area, or an actual location if that's available. And then very important, what evidence is going to be used to support this assertion of homelessness. So if you are a homeless service provider, a housing provider, you may have witnessed that the client was accessing your housing services. And there's some additional check boxes there, or perhaps maybe the verifier witnessed the episode of homelessness firsthand. So there's also some appropriate boxes there. Each box right here indicates the instance. Excuse me, as I mentioned earlier, we're verifying 12 months of homelessness. So that could be 12 consecutive months, which would be one instance here, or up to, or sorry, 4 instances that add up to 12 months in the last 3 years. So if there's multiple instances of homelessness, you will be indicating that in the appropriate instance box. So 1, 2, or 3, however is necessary to verify the chronicity. Next slide, please. Okay. So let's review an alternative way to verify homeless history using an HMIS client report, which is what you can see here. So to do this history report through HMIS, you will go to the client's profile. And by the upper right-hand side, you'll see a little printer here. It's squared off here in red color. So you'll go ahead and click on that. Next slide. From there, it'll take you to this section right here of client reports. We're looking specifically at the homeless status timeline, and you want to click Run. Next slide. Okay, so then it'll populate to this screen stating specifics about the report. So how long into the client's history do we want to look into? Again, we verify 3 years. So we want to do from the day that you're running the report to dating to 3 years back. You also have the option to select the output. So what format the report will be generated. You can select web page or PDF. I would suggest you select PDF that will allow you to save your report. So if you find that it is a report that can verify the client's homelessness, it'll be important to save that document and then, of course, upload to the files. So PDF will save you a little bit of time if you do end up utilizing this report. And of course, you'll click Submit. Next slide, please. Okay, so perfect. Once you click Run, you'll see that the report or that screen kind of goes away, and you'll see a little red dot at the very top, which will indicate when the report is created. Once you do that, you can open the report and it will populate like this. So this is an example in which we can, in fact, verify the homelessness of this client. And when you see green boxes, and specifically when they have a yes, it means that yes, the system is able to verify that month of homelessness for the client. So we can see across the 3 years here, we have 3 instances in 2019. Let's see, about 5 instances, 2020, and then of course a couple more. So let's see. Looks like from 2021 to 2022, we can probably verify the consecutive 12 months. However, if this was not 12 months, and you can see we have different instances, so more than 4, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different instances across the 3 years. So yeah, different ways to verify. Again, you're looking for those green boxes, specifically that they say yes, that will provide verification. If you see yellow boxes or blue boxes, that may mean that perhaps not a housing situation, or there was no verification of homelessness at the interaction with that provider. So this report will provide you with some insight into the client's history. And yeah, okay, next slide. Okay, perfect. And I know that report took a little bit of a handful of slides to get through, but I promise you it's not scary. It's very easy to run that report. And once you get used to it, you'll find it very easily and very useful for your clients. So, okay. This form that you see right here is a self-certification form. This allows the client to self-certify for up to 3 months of their homeless history within the last 3 years. This is a self-report that the client can use to supplement the verification needed And again, the purpose of this verification is for a permanent supportive housing program and documentation. So you can see here on the screen the different ways. So there's multiple boxes in case there's different instances and the type of location. Again, this is self-certified, so the client will sign and the case manager will also certify this form with the client by signing at the bottom. Next slide. Perfect. So here we can see the homeless certification form. This form is only active for 90 days. And please be sure to fill everything out. I want to highlight a couple of boxes here. There is the type of verification that the client, I'm sorry, there's different types of verification that the case manager can select for the client, and it could vary anywhere from living in a place not meant for human habitation to individuals fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence, perhaps residing at an institution and things of that nature. So you'll see different ways to verify. And additionally, you'll see additional little boxes underneath that will further allow you to verify the client's experience. So you'll see different options on where the client may be. For example, the first one indicates that they may be living in a car or out in the street. And there's also another option so you can fill in if that's necessary. So again, this form is only active for 90 days and it will be required to be active at the time of referral. So if for whatever reason, maybe the client was waiting for a referral longer than 90 days and the form is expired at the time of referral, our referral team will ask you to complete a new form, a new homeless certification before we can move forward with a referral. So, okay, next slide. Okay, great. So we have two more poll questions for you all. The first one will be, which set of documents can be used to verify chronicity? Again, those are those 12 months of homelessness, either 12 consecutive months or up to, or 4 instances in the last 3 years that add up to 12 months. And then I believe you can see the second question right there as well. So which document type allows access to all programs for your clients? We'll give you a minute or so to submit your answer, and then we'll review your responses. Just a few more seconds to submit your answers. Okay, great. Looks like we have, let's see, 52% of you indicated HMIS mapping tool, third-party certification, self-certification, and HMIS mapping tool. Let's see. And then for the second one, which document allows the type permanent supportive housing, we got 76% off on that one. Perfect. Thank you so much for participating. We are actually going over. Okay, Sorry, we're actually moving on to the process of document verification for our team. So I'd like to walk you through that now. The SSF referral team utilizes the case conferencing and referral tool in HMIS to assist with document verification process. So here on the screen, you can see how to access the HMIS job aid. And I realize it might be a little bit small, but you can see the arrow right there using the case conferencing tool. This is an HMIS job aid that will provide you an infographic on how to complete this assessment. And next slide, please. Here you can see what the assessment or the referral and case conferencing tool actually looks like. So you can see it collects important information about the client's team. So the agency, primary agency working with the client and primary staff. This will be very helpful for our referral team as well as other community members to know who will be the best point of contact to coordinate support or any type of case management needed for the client. But you'll see that as a question there. We also collect income information and other healthcare information as well. This will be useful information for our referral team to locate appropriateness for our referrals. Next slide. You can see number 3, there's a section for you to enter relevant history and barriers for the client. So any information that will be relevant for us to be able to make a successful referral for the client. That can include evictions if the client has pets, mobility needs for an ADA unit, mental health struggles, just really anything that could impact their housing journey will be important here. There's a section for a care plan. This one is really great. It would be really helpful if you also put your initials and the date that you're enter your note. This will be helpful as the SSF referral team or any other provider come and look at this care plan. They can be confident that they're looking at accurate and recent information. And then there's also action steps as well. So again, format, name, date, and details. This will make sure there's follow through with the client's case management. And then section 4 is for SSF staff. This is a part of the case conferencing tool that our referral team utilizes to verify documentation. So you can see here, there's a section to indicate when the client is in fact document ready, and there's some additional notes for our team to be able to communicate with each other and gather important information that we collect from you all to make, again, a successful referral. I will highlight section 4 is for SSF staff use only. So please do not change or indicate anything here. This will be only for our team. Next slide. Okay, perfect. And a way that you can verify documents or get your client's document verified is through our housing or CAS housing referral and open office hours. This will allow you direct access to our house referral team to review documents, to maybe discuss issues that you may encounter in terms of placements and things like that. If you have questions about the prioritization and things like that, if you need support on what is needed for your client's documentation, if you have questions about how to even begin verification for chronicity, that's a really great space for you to, again, access our team, our referral team, and really just brainstorm and find creative solutions to get your clients ready for referral. That one is happening every Monday, 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. I would say because Mondays sometimes are a holiday for our agency, those may be canceled if there is a holiday. For example, on Monday, referral office hours will be canceled, but will resume the following Monday. So again, 2:30 to 3:30. Next slide. And then biggest takeaway, please remember that clients must have a housing conversation tool and must be document ready to be considered for any housing referrals that become available. Next slide. Okay. So who can verify the client's document readiness status? And you'll have about a minute or so to answer this one. Just a few more seconds to enter your response. Okay, perfect. So we have 70% of you stated the SSF referral specialist, which you are correct. Our referral team must verify doc readiness for your clients. Next slide. Perfect. Right on cue. So I know that was a lot of information so far. We'll take a little break, let you digest the documentation and the different topics that we've covered so far. We have about 10 minutes, so go ahead and take a little break and we'll see you back at 11:16. We'll see you soon.
Alrighty, folks, we're going to start coming back. I'm going to give it about 15 seconds for folks to hear my voice and bring and draw their attention back to these screens, hopefully, so we can finish out the rest of our training. All right, I want to emphasize that you can use the question and answer if you have any questions. We are answering questions during these presentations, so as you have questions, you are more than welcome to use that. And then we also will be doing Q&A afterwards. And then if you need access to these slides and the recording, they will be available to you at the after this training provided by our training team. They'll be sending these out to you via email. So no worries if you don't have everything. Okay, let's get started. So the essential elements of the housing referral process. So everything we just went over was all about the referral preparation. So this is everything that can happen before, everything that has to happen before a referral can be made. So one, access, right? So getting connected to the coordinated access system. Two, doing your assessments, right? Your housing conversation tool, your individualized support plan, your case conferencing tool. And then from there, getting prioritized on the list, right? And seeing where folks land on the list. And then lastly, getting your documents verified. So we know that they're on the priority list and that they have the correct documents for any possible housing openings. And then from there, we're just kind of waiting for any housing openings to come available. And when they do, you know, we always check in with our clients to make sure that they're interested in the housing. If they are, then we submit the referral. And then from there, they will possibly and hopefully have a CAS housing program enrollment. So everything that this training is about and that what you're doing is all about the referral preparation. Next slide. Okay, so again, I do want to emphasize using the Q&A function if you have any questions so that our team can answer them. Okay, so yeah, the next part is just referral transparency. So at the end of the day, SSF is responsible for identifying eligible clients and coordinating referrals to the COC housing programs. However, SSF does not make the determination regarding whether clients are accepted or denied from a program. So simply all that is that referrals facilitate access to housing services and programs within the Sacramento continuum of care. So we have this big group of folks who all need access to housing, and we only have a limited pool of housing availability, right? So we are just facilitating a referral of saying, from these folks, this is the person that we are going to assign to this housing space. So with that, it is important to note that the referrals do not guarantee housing. Both the provider and the client are required to follow up on the housing appointments, applications, and any additional procedures for program enrollment, right? So we are just making the connection to the housing resources. Okay, next one. Okay, so now that we've talked about preparation, everything that needs to happen, now let's talk about populations and the CAS housing programs that we actually have in our COC. So of course, populations, we serve the homeless category 1, which is literally homeless. So individuals or families who lack a fixed, regular, and adequate nighttime residence, meaning that their primary nighttime residence that is a public or private place not meant for human habitation. So that's sleeping in parks, that's sleeping in cars, right? That's a place that humans aren't supposed to be that humans aren't normally habitating. Number 2 is living or in a publicly or privately operated shelter designated to provide temporary living arrangements. And this is including congregate shelters, transitional housing, and hotels and motels paid for by charitable organizations or by federal, state, and or local governments. So these are any of our shelters, like for example, our women's shelter in Meadowview, right? And then some of the transitional housing programs as well. And then we even have like the family hotel, the step up motel shelters. So we have those. So those will count as being category 1. And then is existing in an institution where he or she has resided for 90 days or less, and who's resided in an emergency shelter or a place not meant for human habitation immediately before entering that institution. So for example, say we have a client who was verified previously homeless, but then they happen to go to county jail for only 30 days, right? And then they exit back into homelessness, then they will still be considered homeless, right? It'll keep it going. But if they were in county for longer than 90 days, let's say they were in there for 91 days, and then they go back into homelessness, it no longer counts. So it has to be 90 days or less of that window. Next slide. So our category 4, this is usually we call our survivor system or our survivor clients. These are folks who are fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence. So is fleeing or is attempting to flee domestic violence, human trafficking, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, or other dangerous or life-threatening conditions that relate to violence against individual or a family member, including a child, that has either taken place within the individual's or family's primary nighttime residence, or has made the individual or family afraid to return to their primary nighttime residence. Right, so if that's a place where they are living, and that's their primary space, and these acts are being perpetrated there, right, that counts as their number 1. So it has to be that, and these folks have no other residence to go to, and that they lack the resources or support networks to obtain other permanent housing. Next slide. Okay, so then our last one is at risk of homelessness. So these are folks who have an annual income below 30% area median income, and this changes year by year. And it also is based upon household size of what that looks like. And you can check this on like SHRA's website and HUD websites for the median income. and then does not have sufficient resources or supports networks immediately available to prevent them from moving to an emergency shelter or into homelessness, and is exiting a publicly funded institution or system of care, such as healthcare facility or mental health facility. And meets one of the following conditions. So it has to be all three of those things, and then also meets one of these things. So have moved because of an economic reason 2 or more times during the 60 days immediately preceding applying for homelessness assistance, is living in the home of another because of economic hardship. So this is usually when they have like more than like one household inside of like a single household space. Has been notified in writing that their right to occupy their current housing or living situation will be terminated within 21 days of the date of application for assistance. Due diligence needs to be done to confirm that they will lose their housing without one-time financial assistance, i.e. an eviction notice. Lives in a hotel or motel that is not paid for by the charitable organization or by federal, state, or local government programs for low-income individuals. So this is usually when individuals are paying for their own hotels. And then lives in a single room occupancy or efficiency apartment unit with more than 2 people, or lives in a larger housing unit in which there resides more than 1.5 people per room. Next slide. Yeah, so in terms of the populations, those are the folks who can have access to some of the CAS housing programs we have. So that will be literally homeless, fleeing domestic violence, and then also our at-risk population. So from those programs, we have the Rapid Rehousing Program, which provides short-term up to 3 months and medium-term 4 to 24 months tenant-based rental assistance and supportive services to households experiencing homelessness. So the eligibility requirements for this will be Category 1 and Category 4. Next slide. So then we also have permanent housing with services. So we normally call that PH if you're looking for some acronyms. So this is permanent housing is a community-based housing model, the purpose of which is to provide housing without a designated length of stay. PH program participants must be the tenant on a lease or sublease, which must have an initial term of at least 1 year, be renewable for a minimum term of 1 month, and be terminable only for cause. And any individual, so the eligibility requirements is that any individual or family that falls into Category 1 or 4 or at risk of becoming homelessness. So a lot of these programs are usually our project-based voucher programs with SHRA. Excuse me. And so yeah, these are the programs that we usually consider for our for permanent housing. Next slide. So then we have permanent housing without services, which is also considered permanent housing. And so these are also SHRA voucher programs. So the Sacramento COC partners with SHRA to provide housing vouchers to low-income individuals and families to enable them to afford decent, safe, and sanitary housing in the private rental housing market. And so these are usually our tenant-based vouchers. The housing subsidy is paid to the private landlord directly by SHRA on behalf of the participating family, and the family then pays the difference between the actual rent charged by the landlord and the amount subsidized by the program. And so there are various forms of the tenant-based vouchers, and so that's so then the amount that the client pays is dependent on the program. Next slide. Okay, so then we have the permanent supportive housing, which is PSH, another great acronym. Permanent supportive housing, PSH, is permanent supportive housing in which housing assistance, e.g. long-term leasing or rental assistance and supportive services are provided to assist households with at least 1 member, head of household with a disability in achieving housing stability. And the eligibility requirements is that they have to be Category 1 or 4, also have a verified disability, and have verified chronicity. So this is a higher level of documentation. It's also a higher level of need. And most of these programs come through our COC funded programs. So they are required to have a chronicity and disability. Next slide. All right, question time. So which program type is for clients who need short-term assistance? I'll give you guys about 10 to 15 more seconds. All right, so our poll is 93% of y'all said rapid rehousing, and that is correct. Awesome. Yeah, so which type is, so yeah, that's for short-term housing. We're consistently thinking of rapid rehousing for short-term assistance. Alrighty, next slide. Okay, so again, I'm gonna move it on over to Claudia. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Again, I'm Tlalsane. I'm here to talk to you about the Survivor Coordinated Access System. You'll often hear us refer to it as SCAS, and that is for confidentiality reasons, uh, but also it's just a little bit easier to say as well. So it will be the Survivor Coordinated Access System. And next slide, please. Great. So you can see here the 6 essential elements of Survivor CAS. Again, number 1 is confidentiality. So again, the biggest difference between CAS and SCAS is confidentiality. The system was built to protect survivors' confidentiality and ensure safety, along with ensuring survivors are obtaining services from those with the knowledge and training to manage survivors' safety and confidentiality needs. Victim service provider staff complete anywhere from a 40 to 56-hour training to get certified to serve survivors in their population. They are prohibited from entering personally identifiable information into HMIS or any other shared database. And through the survivor system, they're able to get their participants document ready and access services in a manner that maintains survivors' confidentiality. So 2 is access. Currently, survivors can only access SCAS through victim service providers connected with SCAS. So survivors can also access the standard system resources through HMIS using an anonymous profile to protect their confidentiality. Number 3, assessment. When survivors are connected to a VSP, they are able to assess the survivor for any crisis and safety needs, as well as any other resources they may need, such as housing, healthcare, employment, and education. And number 4, problem solving. Just like everyone else, there's a lack of resources available for survivors in our community. However, our VSPs do their best to support their survivors. The survivors' various needs, including access to safe houses and shelters, safety planning, and providing access to resources while they navigate for more permanent housing solutions. Problem solving, number 4, typically happens in our case conferencing space. This is a space where, again, all of our VSPs in the system are able to come together and discuss problem solve for their clients. Number 5 is prioritization. To access Survivor CAS, survivor-specific prioritization questions are asked in order to prioritize those most vulnerable for housing opportunities. Through the Survivor system, VSPs are able to get their participants document ready and prioritize for openings without risking breach on confidentiality. And number 6, referral. Once housing opportunities arise, those with the highest priority in our list will be referred to that opening. Next slide. Okay. And here you can see a little bit of a graph on how our system moves. So you'll see the provider identifies a survivor, and it'll go all the way to a referral. So if you are a non-VSP and you identify a survivor in need of survivor-specific resources, you would connect them to a local VSP. And then that victim service provider will establish eligibility, complete an assessment, safety planning. From there on, that will get the client in the survivor system, getting them into their priority list. And once a unit becomes available, prioritized clients will be connected with that opening. I do want to highlight that per HUD's definition, a victim service provider is a nonprofit organization whose primary mission is to provide direct services to survivors, included in the category 4 of homelessness. Eligible services could include anywhere from shelter to non-residential programs, rapid rehousing, transitional and permanent housing providers, and supportive services as therapy, case management, outreach, etc. So due to confidentiality protections, the survivor CAS system is only exclusive to victim service providers. And to join as CAS, the victim service provider must complete an SSF onboarding training, which will grant them access to the case conferencing meetings and the ability to add clients to the priority list for housing opportunities. For non-victim service providers, we encourage them to connect their clients to a participating VSP for survivor-specific services and access to survivor CAS. VSPs do have extensive survivor advocate training to best support this community. Again, all of these case managers and providers have to complete anywhere from 40 to 56 hours of trainings and certifications to be able to serve this population. Next slide. Okay, and while it's still fresh in your mind, we do have a poll. So what is a VSP? Go ahead and take a minute to answer. Just a few seconds to get your responses in. Okay, perfect. It looks like 74% of you got it correct and stated victim service provider. Great job. Next slide. Okay, so what are the eligibility requirements for survivor CAS? Chaitra touched on this a little bit ago, category 4 of homelessness. So category 4 of homelessness is someone who is fleeing or attempting to flee domestic violence and has no other residence and also lacks the resources and support networks to obtain permanent housing. I do want to highlight that HUD consolidates the term domestic violence or uses it as an umbrella term to capture all of the other eligible populations as well, such as sexual assault, dating violence, human trafficking, stalking, and all of the other populations included in category 4. You may hear it referenced as domestic violence, but please know that that is inclusive of all other populations in category 4. So category 4 is what is needed to enter survivor system. Now we have 2 types of programs within the system, which is rapid rehousing and permanent supportive housing. As you previously heard, some of the requirements for that are for our system, of course, again, meeting category 4 of homelessness. For permanent supportive housing, the requirements will be the same. So the client needs to meet chronic homelessness, have a certified disability, income must be within 30% AMI, and must have vital documents. Next slide. And in case I did not say this enough, what category of homelessness is eligible for survivor CAS? Take a minute or so to provide your response. Okay, great. Looks like 77% of you got it correct. Category 4 of homelessness is necessary to enter survivor CAS. Next slide. Great. So I do want to introduce you briefly to our housing providers within Survivor System. We have one permanent supportive housing program, and we have 5 rapid rehousing partners, including Opening Doors, My Sister's House, Shelter Inc., Lao Family, and Bridging Initiatives Internationals as our rapid rehousing providers. And again, we with PSH. Next slide. So who are the access points, right? Here in the next 2 slides, you will see the participating access points victim service providers for survivor CAS. You can see them here on the screen. Briefly is We, Opening Doors, My Sister's House, Shelter Inc., Lao Family, CASH or Community Against Sexual Harm, Family Justice Center or FJC, International Rescue Committee, IRC. Next slide. Intertribal Council of California, 3 Strands Global Foundations, and Connect to Change. So these are our participating partners serving as access points. So these are the providers to connect your survivors to enter survivor CAS. Next slide. Okay. Now a question, all CAS assessors can access survivor CAS. True or false? Perfect. False. 62% of you got it correct. False. Not all CAS assessors can access survivor CAS. All victim service providers in survivor CAS are also CAS assessors, but not all CAS assessors are victim service providers. Next slide. Okay, so here's some information if you would like to connect with our team. We have our SSF CAS housing referral. It will be at referrals@sacsstepsforward.org. If you have questions about our survivor system, you can connect with us at scas@sacsstepsforward.org. If you have questions about CAS in general, you can connect with CAS at SAC Steps. Or if you have questions about trainings, you can connect with trainings at SAC Steps. Next slide. If you have any unanswered questions about post-assessment practices, this will be a really great start. I'll start off with a question that I saw in the chat from Jonathan. It states, when starting a new ISP or HCT, why doesn't all feels clear when starting a new HCT or ISP? That's actually a great question. You'll see that when there's already an existing assessment in the client's file and you create a new one, if the assessment is within 60 days, some of those questions, some of the collected answers will cascade to the new assessment. Again, this needs to be within 60 days. If it's longer than 60 days, I believe it will clear. And this just serves as a bit of a shortcut to not have to collect information or the same information from the client if it's not necessary. Of course, if you're completing a new assessment, you'll answer all of those appropriate questions with the client, but that is a feature from our HMIS team to cascade those answers over. Great question, Jonathan. Good observation. And I believe we had answered all of the Q&A questions, but if any additional questions come up, let us know.
Thank you so much. There's a great question in the Q&A here. The questions by Jeffrey, the questions that were asked during the first session before the break have been deleted. How can we get those answers? This is exactly why we use our Q&A section. All the questions and answers that are relevant to today's training will be delivered to you via email. I hope that helps.
I have a question from Jamie. Can you go back and update previous months of the living situation if you were working with someone during this time? From my understanding, yes, you can. But you can also get double verification by going to HMIS office hours. But you should be able to do that, yes. I see another question. If a case manager has not obtained access to the COC program yet, and they complete the ISP in the shelter program, will the information port over to the COC ISP once access is granted? Do you have insight on that, Glazine?
Yeah, I was a little confused. Maybe if you don't have access to the COC agency, I'm assuming you mean the CAS agency. You probably don't have access to those assessments. However, if an assessment was completed, an ISP or HCT was completed from another CAS assessor in a shelter program, that will always be in the client's profile. So even if you yourself as an assessor don't have access, but someone who is a CAS assessor completed the assessment, that will live in the client's profile. When you do get your access, you'll be able to access the CAS agency, and all of those assessments and previous history will be visible to you as well. I think that might be the nature of the question. Great question. We also have another question from Linda Xavier. How do we know who is a victim service provider in our community? Is there a list? Yes, there is a list. We will make sure to provide that list along with the follow-up materials for this presentation. You will see the list will indicate all of our access points as well as our housing providers. You'll have information about how to connect with them, the type of services that they offer, and the type of population they serve. you'll find that not all providers serve the same populations. It could be that some serve just human trafficking, some may be specific for sexual harm. So you'll be able to reference that in that sheet so you can triage and facilitate a warm handoff for your client. Great question.
I see something at the bottom. One of our coworkers has been locked out of HMIS for a month. She's our supervisor. So in that situation, I would reach out to HMIS directly. So you can email hmis@sackstepsforward.org and tell them your situation. And usually they're able to give you access again. I do it all the time where like we have to change our passwords every so often. And I'm like putting in my old password and then it's like, you're locked out. And I'm like, I swear I know it. So yeah, constantly I ask them to help unban me and give me access. So feel free to connect with them and you're not alone.
I just banned myself like 2 days ago, so you're
Yeah.
definitely not alone. I would also say if you have difficulties reaching our HMIS team, you can hop on their HMIS open office hours. They actually
Mhm.
happen Wednesdays every week. And I believe they're 12 to 2 p.m. We can
Mhm.
put that information in the chat shortly, but that will be another space where you can access your team directly and get a quicker answer.
Yeah, right then and there if you're like a live person at that moment instead of an email.
We do have two raised hands here. We've got Aaron Snowden. If you're still with us, you are welcome to unmute and ask your question. Okay, we'll go on to Patrick Cornell. You are welcome to unmute and ask your question. If you are still with us, looks like you just left too. So we'll move on to Leslie.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, this may be like a more personal account, but if I was accidentally added to Yolo County instead of Sacramento, how would I go about? Do I just contact the HMIS web email?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So our HMIS team does both YOLO and Sacramento. So just connect with them and they should be able to rectify it.
Thank you.
Okay, and Patrick, we'll try once again if you're still with us.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, so going over to Howie from Nation's Finest, we are just recently being told that the homeless certs don't expire. Once we put one in, we don't have to keep putting one in due to the fact that we're active in the HMIS under the doing the new check-in, letting I don't even remember what the name of that thing is.
The current living situation.
Current living situation. They changed the third party. We're not doing chronics anymore. Because all that lives within the third party and the disability cert. So once we do a homeless cert and it lives in there, they'll only ask us to update that on the due or on the time of a new referral. And that's the only time.
Correct. You will need a homeless certification active at the time of referral.
Yeah.
So if again, your client is waiting for placement or a referral longer than 90 days and that homeless certification expires, we won't ask you to submit a new one until we are inquiring about a referral with you. You're correct.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Patrick.
You're welcome.
Okay, so someone asked a question about a certain score that you get on the crisis assessment. So this is more so about accessing housing. So I don't have too much insight on the crisis assessment and the scoring for that. That's more so around shelter and the housing prevention.
Can I speak on it?
I don't know. Well, it won't be official, but if you would like to, I guess.
Yeah, when doing the crisis assessment, it opens you up to a lot of different things, not just a shelter. It also opens you up to the PSAP funds, rapid
Housing prevention.
rehousing, a lot of different things. Anything with a score of 100 or higher will get you into certain shelters. You can see the list of them, that it points them out. But also at the bottom of it, if you're trying to make a shelter referral, you go ahead and hit those two tabs to either one, get services, or two, get a referral going. But yeah, it's anything over 100. And yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Unofficial.
Patrick. Thanks, Patrick.
You're welcome.
Yes, 211 will utilize some of the scoring to help prioritize those referrals. I don't have specific insight on those numbers, but if you do have questions, I will welcome you to the HMIS open hours.
While we are holding space for any more questions, I will remind everyone as you exit and leave the meeting, please take a moment to complete our exit survey. We appreciate it so much, and it helps us to improve these trainings for the next iteration. Additionally, you will get a thank you email with a copy of the training materials, the additional list that was mentioned regarding the BSPs, and a reminder about our housing problem solving training coming up in March that is facilitated by our wonderful facilitators, our PWLEs, people with lived expertise. Housing problem solving is March 12th to the 14th. It's 2.5 days in-person training. It fills up fast. In fact, it's 60% full. So please be sure, if you are on the CAS Assessor certification path, this is required. So please be sure to look for that link in your email as well. And it appears all of our questions have been cleared. Yes. Excellent. With that, we will complete today's training. Thank you again. If you have not registered for the last two parts of our training, they also will be in your thank you email as well. And those dates are the 18th next week, February 18th and February 26th. The 18th is Introduction to Conversational Case Management and our Implicit Bias Training. And then the 26th is the Intro to Trauma-Informed Practices and Strategies to Prevent Vicarious Trauma. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for all that you do in the community. And thank you, Shaitra. Thank you, Talzeen, for being here with us and answering all the wonderful questions.
Thank you, everyone.